Welcome to the Rosa Rhea podcast.
We're sisters who like to talk about sex, love, and relationships.
I'm Rosa.
And I'm Rhea.
And we're here to help you have more intimacy and better relationships. And today we're going to talk about drugs.
Yeah.
Okay, kids, we're talking about drugs today. So drugs, like what drugs have you done?
Okay, well, in this case, we want to consider alcohol to be a drug. Mm-hmm. Right? We're going to include that. So, I've done alcohol. I haven't done cocaine before. I did ecstasy probably like 3 times in high school. I did mushrooms twice.
You've definitely done mushrooms more than twice.
Maybe 3 times at most.
That's it?
Yeah.
Oh.
At most.
Okay.
Again, probably because I had a bad trip, right?
Right.
And then that's it. I can't remember having done any other drugs.
What about acid?
No.
Really?
No.
Oh, okay. I've done MDMA or ecstasy or whatever. I really don't like it. It's way too much emotions for me. I've done lots of prescription drugs. That's like what I'm into. I've done Xanax. I love Xanax.
Oh my God.
But you have to be very careful. Like I'm the kind of person who's extremely careful. I do it like very sparingly. Probably at this point in my life, I'm not doing drugs anymore. If someone offered me a Xanax, I'd be like, you know what? I'd rather deal with my anxieties in a different way. Percocet, when it came out, I did a lot of that. And again, that's real. You got to be really careful because I watched all the people around me who are doing that pretty much get addicted and have really negative impacts in their life. And if I really looked at it, my life was negatively impacted as well. It was pretty much just laying around 10 hours a day, getting high, watching TV. Mm-hmm. And, I was in my early 20s. There's a lot of consequences that came with that. But yeah, that's a legal drug that I'm talking about.
I know.
Right? So we have to have that in a category as well. And we have to be very mindful about that kind of intake. Drugs can be really fun and the association is really fun usually. I've done mushrooms before. But then one time when I was 17, I was babysitting and I was at a friend's house whose dad had like a baby late in life. So I was very comfortable at this house. I was like kind of just baby in one hand and the other hand was just like in the kitchen, just like eating whatever was available. And they didn't have that much food. So I like went in the freezer. There was these chocolates. I ate a couple of those. And I had to like warm them up because they were frozen. But I was very distracted. This baby was only like 10 weeks old. So I was just like, bouncing the baby, eating. And when you're 17, you're like super hungry. So I just ate whatever that was there. And then like however long later, I started feeling weird. Like my legs felt wonky. And I was like, this is weird. I feel weird. So I texted the dad and I was like, hey, do you mind coming home? Because he had already said like the baby's really young. Whenever you're ready to like get out of here, just let me know. So I texted him. He came back. And I was like, yeah, I'm sorry. Like I just feel really weird. And I think I need to go home. But it was freaking me out. I felt like maybe I had been poisoned. I was racking my brain. I even told the cab driver. I like called my boyfriend. I was like, I have to come over. I called my mom. Finally, like 15 minutes later, it occurred to me that I had eaten those chocolates. And I texted the dad. And I was like, could it have been the chocolates? And he called me right away. And he's like, how many chocolates did you eat? And I was like, 2. And it was just silence on the other line. Like silence. And he's like, you're going to be high for a very long time.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's not good. And that's the kind of experience that probably makes me not want to do drugs.
I never did mushrooms again.
Yeah. Same. I had a similar thing. I had done mushrooms maybe 2 times. One time was amazing. It was funny. You're laughing. And then the next time it was like dark and fucking, I thought someone was following us and it got real dark. And I was like, I'm not here for these kinds of emotions. You know?
And I've heard really positive things about mushrooms as well. I have a friend who said that, it helps you see things from a different perspective. And you know what? That's what this podcast does for me. I don't need to take a drug. Yeah. For me, conversation, like diving into like my beliefs, my opinions, that helps me see things from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And it's not as scary and you don't die from it. Or have a trip that lasts for hours and hours and hours. So yeah, basically the end of my mushroom trip was just staring at a ceiling, tripping out for like hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really crazy. And, it was good that you brought up the prescription drugs too, because I have taken prescription drugs before. One time I was in the hospital and they gave me morphine through an IV, and I got so high. It made me never, ever, like, I was like, right away, I was like, you need to start giving me T3s or something. It was too much. Like, I was hallucinating. It was scary. And this was in a hospital,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I know that they are pretty careful. Like, we've talked about this from the other point of view, is that, sometimes when you go to get a procedure done, they don't give you enough pain meds.
Yeah.
They don't warn you that there's going to be a lot of pain. And then the flip side is that sometimes you can get morphine prescribed to you, and it can be very traumatic on the brain, on the body, and it's not actually what you needed. They don't know how sensitive you are.
And that's actually the interesting point that you bring up about pain. So, I think a lot of people do take drugs, and I'm including, remember, alcohol in this, to sort of numb a pain. But again, and you also said, well, I don't need to necessarily take drugs because I deal with my emotions by talking. So I think that, feeling pain isn't always a bad thing. Like, if you're in really terrible pain, yeah, you want to, that's not great. But I think it's okay to feel a little bit of emotional pain, a little bit of physical pain, and then deal with it, right? Instead of taking a drug.
Yeah, I think what we're saying is that basically a lot of people will try and mask that pain.
Yeah.
The biggest undercover drug is alcohol. And that's really what we want to touch on today. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
It's the most socially acceptable drug that we can do.
Like, ever since you turn whatever the legal age of drinking is, 19, 21, 18, wherever it is in the world, it's like something to look forward to.
Yeah.
And there's ads everywhere. Of course, we could say there's ads for prescription drugs too, right? And those are legal. But alcohol is like in your face all the time, wherever you go.
Absolutely. I remember when I was in grade 7, those Absolute ads, that was a huge ad campaign. That was incredible. I would rip the Absolute ads out of the magazines and put them up. It was like a thing to collect them.
Yeah.
And then our friend group was called like the Absolute whatever. Like, we were very subliminally affected by this alcohol advertisement. We didn't really drink when we were 12.
Yeah.
But we were very excited to. And it was always something on the horizon, and it was always in our face with advertising.
And then it just continues on from there. Socially, you come into social situations. And of course, this varies, country to country. We're in Canada right now. Everywhere is going to be different. Some countries have more of a alcohol culture than others. You're getting advertised to, you're looking forward to drinking. And then now you're looking forward to the weekends, getting together with your friends, going to parties, going to clubs. And then even as you go on in years, it's like dating, you're drinking. Anytime you're socializing, you're drinking.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this has been going around the internet lately. It's the only drug that we have to justify not doing. Right? So if somebody was like, I think I'm not going to do cocaine this weekend, like, people wouldn't be like, why? How long are you stopping for? Like, are you sure you don't just want a little bit? Like, when it comes to alcohol and you say something like, yeah, I'm off alcohol right now, people want to know why. People want to know for how long. They want to know, well, are you an alcoholic? They want to label you right away. They want a reason. They want an explanation. And, you don't need to justify it. That's one thing that is really important to remember.
Yeah. And it's really hard. I'm not, like, I don't say, oh, I don't ever drink. But like the other day I was out at a restaurant and I was trying to say that I didn't want to order a drink. And the server was like pushing it on me, like pushing the wine list on me. And I realized right then and there, it's like so challenging, especially if you're trying to be sober, right? And you're going into places and people don't really care for your boundaries.
Yeah.
The same thing that we talk about with sex. It's like you have to be very firm with your boundaries. Again, you don't have to, you don't owe anyone an explanation. But what I will tell you is people are going to really try and push it on you. And you have to be like, no, and I'm not drinking. Please stop.
Absolutely. And our hearts go out to anyone who's like really an alcoholic or who's trying to be sober or for whatever reason not drinking. But you may still have a little bit of that desire. Mm-hmm. And then people are encouraging you constantly to drink.
Yeah. And then the kicker was when I was having lunch and this person was trying to push alcohol on me, the server, then the person, some of the people at the table were like, oh, you're no fun, right? The people I was socializing with.
Yeah.
So then there's like that layer, right? The pressure within your own friend group, right? And it's like, oh God, again, they want some sort of explanation. You're not fun anymore. It's like very, very intense.
Absolutely. And then when it comes to dating, say you're single like Rhea and I, and you get invited on a date. What are you going to do? You're going to go for drinks.
Yeah.
When you start dating, you could be going for coffee, first of all, but eventually it is going to lead into let's grab a drink or let's go for dinner. Let's have a bottle of wine with dinner. Let's have a picnic with a bottle of wine. Dating really has a lot to do with drinking. It's very intertwined is what I'm trying to say.
And it's a slippery slope because that's very common, right? You go on Tinder and then, like you say, you go for coffee and then you're like, okay, well, let's go for dinner or drinks. And then again, for me, like I don't drink that much. So that's fine to do that once in a while. But then I've been in situations where it's like every time now that I'm going on a date with this person, we're doing that same thing. We're going for drinks and dinner. And that doesn't really jive with my lifestyle, to be honest. Let's talk about some of the negative. Why we think that alcohol isn't that great.
Right. Because it is true that alcohol and dating are intertwined, or it's socially acceptable to drink alcohol a lot. But the fact is that it will negatively affect your life. And that's the whole point we're trying to make.
Like for me, like I'm just going to list some things. And these are totally anecdotal things. They're just from my experience. And this is why I personally don't like to drink. Number one, it does not make my personality any better, in my opinion. I don't think that I'm more social. If anything, I'm actually the opposite of that. I actually turn a little bit antisocial if I were to really analyze things. I think I'm a much more interesting person sober. So that's one thing. Two, I hate hangovers. So if I'm taking something, a substance, and it makes me feel sick the next day, that's a red flag. Maybe I'm just sensitive, I don't know, but like I don't want to be tired or feel like my stomach is hurting or feel like I have to throw up. Like that to me is wasting a good day. And so another reason I don't want to drink.
Absolutely. And then what about sex?
The sex, but before even sex is sleep. Okay, it affects my sleep. I'll have 2 glasses of wine even, and my sleep is negatively affected. If you can't sleep properly, you're not going to be healthy. You're not going to be your best self. Your mind's not going to be 100, and your sex is definitely not going to be good. And it also, when I drink and have sex, I can barely orgasm.
Yes, and that is one of the biggest points, because why would you want to do something that numbs you? For me, as far as orgasms go, I usually enjoy sex when I'm drunk and it's a little bit rowdier, but I can never come. Even when I'm masturbating and I'm a little bit tipsy, it just does not happen. It's very bizarre.
And the same thing for men. We know that.
Yeah, we know that.
And I mean, I think women, we don't talk about this. I mean, again, we can't even talk about having sober orgasms and all this pleasure stuff. So yeah, women never talk about this. But I think for sure, if you were to ask women, it would be harder for them to come having had a few drinks. And I mean, I notice it all the time with guys. It's terrible. I hate having sex with guys that are drunk. That is like the worst thing ever, in my opinion. And another thing that I don't like about alcohol and sex is it really blurs the lines and makes consent hard to read. So it's hard to give consent when you're drunk because, you have a haze of alcohol. You're an altered level of consciousness, really.
Yeah, and you're making decisions that you might not necessarily make when you're sober.
Exactly. And then also, and we've talked about this before, but this is very, very key for me. It can affect a person's ability to read consent. If you're a guy, you should be really thinking about that. If you're going out and getting shit-faced on the weekends and then going and picking up girls that you might not even know very well, or even if you do know, it could be even your girlfriend, you should be very cautious. If you wake up the next morning and you can't remember what happened, seriously, you could be harming women.
Yeah, and we don't want that.
That is not good. So to me, it's a huge negative.
And then, I just wanted to add one thing about sleep. So I learned that sedation is not sleep in the same way that real sleep is sleep. And when we do sleep without sedation, our brain literally gets rid of all the bad plaque, all the buildup of bad cells. Your brain gets to work when you're sleeping. And if you are not able to, there's basically a lymphatic drainage system in your brain, just like in your body, that works while you're in a deep sleep, but it does not work the same way while you're sedated with alcohol. So that could be one of the reasons why you might experience brain fog the next day.
Because you're not well rested.
When you're not well rested. But it also then in the future will cause you to have brain disease like Alzheimer's or dementia. Yeah. And that's proven.
That's a really good point. And then another negative, okay, this is a really long list, you guys.
We could really keep going for days.
But I am going to add this in. It's like on your body, right? So it has an effect on your brain, as Rosa just stated, and it also has an effect on your body. And when you're drinking alcohol, you're drinking calories, you're drinking sugar, and that's going to really have a negative effect. When people come to me and they say, oh, I want to change the way my body looks or change the way my body feels, the number one advice I give them is to cut out all alcohol.
And then, getting back to using alcohol as a stress relief or even as anxiety relief. I talk a lot about positive feedback loops and how to experience joy. And this is a perfect example of a negative feedback loop. You get drunk, you have a hangover, you feel anxiety because of either your body is producing whatever it takes to feel anxiety, or you did something embarrassing and you feel anxiety because of that. Then once you feel that anxiety, you want to have another drink.
Yeah,
to start pushing down. I've done that before. The first podcast that came out over a year ago, I got wasted. I couldn't deal with the anxiety. I was so nervous, and just putting, that information out there, I got really drunk. Yeah. And then how do you think I felt the next day?
Really bad.
I felt really bad. I was hungover, and I couldn't celebrate the fact that our podcast was doing really well.
I think alcohol increases anxiety. I feel like I have a lot of anxiety when I have a hangover, and I don't think that is good at all. I really don't.
No, and society has made a million reasons to drink. Getting back to the social aspect, you hang out with all your friends, they're out having a good time, you get there, they're like, what do you want to drink? Whether you're at a party or a restaurant, whatever it may be, everyone's going to say, what do you want to drink? That's very normal. And if you want friends and if you want to fit in and socialize, you're going to have a drink.
Yeah.
It's very normal to do that. And, the same thing happens with cocaine. I remember when I was just getting into this one friend group and we were always out partying, and they'd all go to the bathroom together every however long, 20 minutes, and do coke. And if I didn't go with them, I would just be sitting in a club by myself.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was like, I can either have friends and do cocaine or have no friends and do no cocaine. And I chose friends and cocaine. And for a little while, I was doing it every weekend. It was really fun. I wouldn't do very much. Luckily, I didn't really like it. You have to be really careful when you're doing drugs. You can get into a very bad position. People get addicted to cocaine, and luckily I didn't. I didn't like it that much, but I was using it in a social aspect to get friends or to bond with people.
No, it's so true. And, I've had friends who, well, I don't even need to speak on them. Even for myself, it's like sometimes if you're like me and you don't want to drink alcohol and you don't want to do cocaine, just like you say, it's like you kind of have to accept that you're not going to be able to hang out with a lot of people, because some of those people don't want to hang out with people that aren't taking part. And that's really important to them. You might have to do a little grieving. If you listen to this podcast and you say, oh, wow, I've been dying to make this change. I don't really feel like drinking all the time. You might have to really say goodbye to a lot of people that you thought you cared about, because they're just not on the same page, and that's just a boundary that you're going to have to lay down. But I guarantee you're going to have a lot less anxiety and a lot better sleep.
I know for a fact that this is the advice that they give in AA. And I have witnessed people grieving their old lives.
Yeah.
Because it's hard. It's tough.
It's really hard.
But one other thing that I wanted to mention is that alcohol is very expensive.
Very expensive. And that's the crazy part to me, is because especially having been had very little money, I can't imagine having not very much money for food and then going to buy alcohol, which is what people do, and they
Yeah.
really put it above the necessities. If that's what you're doing, you really got to take a look at that. And even if you aren't, even if you do have a lot of money, like you say, it's very, very expensive. Like, write down how much you spend on alcohol every month and you might be shocked.
Ray and I do drink sometimes.
Yeah.
And I was going to bring over maybe a few weeks ago a bottle of rosé. And I went to the liquor store. It was like $25. And for me, who's on a budget, that would blow my entire budget just for one bottle of rosé. Truth be told, like, that's not even going to really do much for us. We're not going to drink more than that, but it's not going to like make you super drunk or anything. That's not a lot of alcohol if you're two adults drinking all day. I could easily drink that to myself, but $25, even in the liquor store, to me, that's a lot of money that I could be putting somewhere else. I could put that into savings.
Oh, yeah.
And
so
then,
many things.
Yeah. Rhea's tip is amazing. Write down how much you're spending on alcohol. It could really shock you. And that might just be the shock you need to reprioritize. For me, half the time that my friends ask me to go out drinking now, I don't go. So now I'm spending half the money on alcohol.
Yeah.
I still drink. I like drinking. But I am being very aware and conscious of all of the things that we just listed. There's a lot of negative effects. And that could take a really bad turn very quickly in your life and not be aligning with your priorities or your goals. It puts you at a standstill, or maybe you're even going backwards.
And also, talking about money, not only is it expensive on a personal level to your own budget, but it has a huge cost to society. And this is something that people don't talk about, obviously, because alcohol is a big money generator. We pay a lot of taxes on alcohol too, so it's good for the government. Right here in BC, it's government-run liquor stores, so they're getting a huge tax dollar on this alcohol.
And also you get taxed on it at restaurants.
Right. And I think that's very important that at the very least tax it, because there is a huge cost to society, to the medical system, to the hospitals. And a lot of things that we don't attribute to alcohol are actually alcohol related, right? So if you have people getting sick, really what they might need to do is to quit alcohol to make some serious life changes and make some benefits. And also, we should also mention that alcohol is the one drug that you could die from when you're withdrawing.
Yeah, it's very dangerous to withdraw from.
That's how sick it makes you. And, having worked as an emergency medical technician, I saw firsthand people suffering from alcohol abuse. And this isn't just poor people, okay? This is people of every demographic that are affected by alcohol in a negative way. And it's a really profound cost to society every day and to the medical system, like I said. So think about that too when you're drinking, because I think a lot of people are really suffering and they're really, really sick. We'll talk about enabling. We'll probably do a whole episode on being an enabler, but that's another level for me too. It's like, I don't have a lot of joy for drinking anymore because I've seen so much suffering that it's caused. So I don't like drinking because I almost feel like an enabler just doing it with people. Yeah. It's kind of depressing for me.
Yeah, and this episode's kind of depressing. There are sexy aspects to drugs too. I know a lot of people who use drugs that like MDMA and they enjoy sex a little more, or what else would there be?
Well, there's a lot of sex drugs.
And that can enhance things. That can be very exciting. And again, I just would say be very, very careful and keep all these things in mind when you are using drugs or alcohol. We're not telling anyone to stop. We wanted to give our perspective on what's going on with society and things that are acceptable. I myself work in the restaurant industry, and it's so acceptable to be drinking all the time, and it's around you all the time. And I have seen over the years a lot of people come out of that and get sober and say, I'm stronger than this and I don't want alcohol in my life anymore. And that inspires me so much.
Yeah.
To get healthy and to make that kind of change is very inspiring, especially with society having so much pressure on us and it being so acceptable.
Yeah. And if you feel like you have to, even on a very low level, you have to numb yourself a little bit, really question that. Like, really think about that. Like, what don't you want to feel? Rosa hit the nail on the head. You know, what makes her feel good is not drinking. That's the opposite. It gives her anxiety. What makes her feel good is talking about stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so think about other ways. If you're trying to numb some trauma, if you're trying to numb some feeling or some pain, you know, maybe you need to talk about it with someone, right? And work through it in other ways that aren't so harmful, other ways that aren't going to give you side effects, that aren't going to affect your sleep, that aren't going to give you hangovers, that aren't going to make you die. Healthy things.
Yeah. Well, I actually do like drinking, but I have had to become very mindful of when I'm drinking, become very mindful of how much I'm spending on alcohol, and also become very strong with my boundaries. Moving into, if you're inspired by this and you also want to set some boundaries for your alcohol consumption, boundaries and goals to me are the same thing, and people need to respect that. So for me, one of them, like I said before, is if my friends invite me out, half the time I say no. So basically it's about once a week. I might go out and see them. Once in a while, I'll have a glass of wine. But again, I have to be so careful because it is not worth it to me to be hungover. And it can happen so quickly. So one of my boundaries is 1 to 2 drinks maximum.
Yeah.
At all times.
And you can even, I would give the same advice that I give for when we're talking about sex and trying to open up in your relationship. It's going to be hard, right? Because I experienced this. I mentioned the story earlier when people are really trying to push the alcohol. You want to have firm boundaries, but I would also suggest practicing telling people, practicing talking about it. Again, you don't owe anyone an explanation, but, you know, just here and there, be like, you know, I'm not drinking. It's just how I feel. Like I'm only having, or maybe you're saying, I only have 2 drinks. That's it. If you could remind me of that maybe, or have, you know, open up with your friends about it. Or my goal is, you can talk about your goals. My goal is to, you know, not drink this month and maybe not the next month. I'd really appreciate it if you support me in that. Or you can talk to, you know, whomever, and just like practice little baby steps and just like, because again, we were talking about how people hide it sometimes too. Like, you know, I've heard friends who are trying to get sober, they say, oh, I go out, I'll get a drink. Rather than talking about how they're not drinking, they'll get a drink that looks like alcohol so they don't have to make an explanation. That's fine if that makes you comfortable. But if you feel the courage, I would really encourage you guys to just like slowly bring it up in conversation. And that may give you power.
Totally. You know? Communication is key. And then with people that you trust, hopefully they'll be on board.
And then the people that aren't on board, you get rid of them.
Yeah.
So if you're telling people your goals and your boundaries, regardless of what it is about, and these people aren't supporting you or they're giving you negative comments like, oh, you're no fun anymore. Oh, why aren't you drinking? All this bullshit. Get rid of these people. Yeah. Right? They're not here for you.
Yeah.
You know?
And then also, just recognize when other people are setting boundaries with you or sharing their goals with you, and respect their boundaries and their goals as well.
Yeah.
Right? And recognize that communication is so lovely, so courageous, so vulnerable. Welcome it and respect it, and that's it. Thank you so much for listening. For more Rosa and Rhea, go to youtube.com/Rosa and Rhea or head to our website, www.rosaandrhea.com.